My name is Joe Hadzima. I'm a senior lecturer at the MIT Sloan School of Management. And this presentation is about university licensing with particular emphasis on MIT's approach. A little background on university licensing. In general, when people pay for something, they expect to own it. And that's exactly what the federal government did when it sponsored research at universities. It says if we paid for it, we owned it. However, by 1980, it became clear that this perhaps wasn't working, and that gave rise to the Bayh-Dole Act. The background was that prior to the enactment of Bayh-Dole, the US government had accumulated over 30,000 patents. And those that were licensed were only licensed non-exclusively. A non-exclusive license does not provide a great incentive to be able to invest additional money on the part of investors to take something to market. As a result, few patents were commercialized, and in fact, only about 5% of federally owned patents were commercially licensed. And so what decided was we should reverse this. We should have ownership at the places where the inventions are occurring. And so Bayh-Dole permitted universities to retain ownership of IP funded by federal government. It also permitted the universities to license this exclusively to provide more incentive for commercialization. And as a result, there was a dramatic increase in the commercialization of research funded by the federal government. Bayh-Dole required universities to retain ownership of the inventions created under government funding, to file patents on those as appropriate, to give licensing preferences to small businesses, recognizing that it's the small innovative companies that often get inventions to market faster than large established companies, and to provide the government with a royalty-free, non-exclusive license to make use, etc., the inventions for government purposes in case it's needed. The universities were also required to develop programs to commercialize patents. It wasn't enough just to say that, okay, we're going to have these patents. This led to the creation of tech transfer offices or the expansion of those offices. And there was also thought that any returns from these inventions should be shared somewhat with inventors to provide additional incentives for inventors to come forward. The MIT Technology Licensing Office, the TLO, is MIT's tech transfer office. Its mission is to facilitate the transfer of technologies from MIT, Lincoln Laboratory, and Whitehead Institute. A secondary goal is to generate funds. This is unlike some universities where the primary goal seems to be maximizing income. In MIT's case, the optic is we want to get the stuff that's done here out into the market to benefit society. You can read up more about the Technology Licensing Office at its website, tlo.mit.edu. So let's go into some of the ownership policies here. MIT owns the patent or copyright if significant use was made of MIT facilities. This would be, for example, major equipment, the nuclear reactor, etc. Normal use of the computer network would not be a significant use. MIT would own the copyright or patent if MIT administered funds were used. This would be either federal funds or sponsored funds from industry. And textbooks are an exception in the sense that these are written by faculty, and MIT would not own those. MIT does not assign ownership to a licensee or a research sponsor. It retains it itself. It does guarantee sponsors, this would be industry sponsors, first rights to inventions made using their funds. Now, MIT can waive its rights to an invention if there are no sponsor rights involved, no significant use of facilities, no use of funds, administered funds, and no plans to reduce to practice the technology at MIT facilities. It's important if you're thinking about starting a company using technology that you developed at MIT or things you did at MIT, that you get a clean bill of health, because investors are going to want to make sure that there are no claims to what you do. This last one, by the way, no plans to use MIT facilities to reduce to practice, is one of the main reasons why Kendall Square has become the hotbed it is. It's close to MIT. The research is done initially in an MIT lab. Somebody licenses something from MIT. The people working on it go across the street to, non-MIT facilities and continue the development of the work there. In addition to rights to inventions from sponsored research, MIT has a policy regarding a voluntary handover of technologies to MIT. This recognizes that there's a lot of smart people running around and a lot of good ideas. And so if somebody comes to the technology licensing office and makes a case for it, the TLO may agree to accept the invention and to prosecute the patents and to handle commercialization, licensing with the usual royalty sharing arrangements that we'll talk about a little bit later. Now, the startups have a particular quandary. They want to raise money to develop something or commercialize it. As you'll see in a few slides, getting a license can be expensive. So how in the world do they get the money to get a license at the same time explaining to the people the money coming in that they can get a license? Well, the thing that spans this is an option to obtain a license. This is typically for 6 months to a year, and it says it doesn't cost very much at all. And it allows the startup to say, we have secured the rights to obtain a license to do X, Y, or Z. Here's our plan to do X, Y, or Z. We're looking for money, and you put the money in, we'll get the license, which we've tied up, and we'll move forward. It allows time to invest the time and effort it takes to raise money and get the company going. Now, when it comes time to actually finalize the license, you'll have to consider the various terms, and we'll talk through these components. First of all, for licenses that are simply for cash, all cash payments, as opposed to cash and some equity, here are some of the typical terms that you'll see. License issuance fee might be $50,000 to $150,000. This is the payment you must make up front when the license is signed. There are annual fees to maintain the license based on expected running royalties. You definitely cannot leave it on the shelf if you don't take steps to commercialize what you've licensed. MIT will come back and to take the license away from you. If you think of a patent has a life of 20 years from the date of filing. So if you sit on it for 10 years, you've significantly reduced the benefit of having that patent. So they want to get stuff in the market. They don't want it languishing on the shelf. The royalties, when you do get product going, anywhere from 3 to 5% of sales. Patent costs, which you're required to pay, can range all over the place, 25,000 to 200,000, depending on the number of patents and what countries, etc. There's no requirement that the licensee sponsor any research. Now, recognizing that these terms can be a little much for a startup, and also recognizing that the potential that a startup has is in the value of its stock, the TLO did adopt policies where it would take equity partially in lieu of fees And as you can expect, this reduces the cash components of the cash portions of the components here. And you can see what's here. Now these are sort of typical terms. At a point in time, they may be different as you're viewing this, but it'll give you some idea of what's involved. Now, what about equity? Well, the typical thing would be a single-digit percentage of equity, maybe 5%, 6, 7%. And this is maintained at that percentage level through the first $5 or $10 million raised, whatever the business plan is that you show the TLO. As part of the licensing process, you have to show your commercialization plan. And if it says we're going to need $5 million, in the first, to get the thing going, M.I.T. says that's fine. We want our 5% to still have that 5% once you've raised the $5 million. In other words, we do not get diluted in our ownership through the initial raise. Thereafter, proportionally diluted. In some cases, M.I.T. would have the right to participate in future rounds of financing. Have not seen many cases where it's actually used that right. Now, this sends a message to the market, to the investors, that M.I.T. thinks this is an important enough technology with important potential that it's taking part of its compensation in equity. And I think that's a big statement. Also, to potential competitors in the market to know that you've licensed technology from M.I.T. M.I.T. owns part of the company. This is a 800-pound gorilla standing right behind you as you face other people in the market. Typical royalties for patents. These are some ranges at a point in time, again, to give you some rough idea. As in anything, the market changes from time to time, emphasis changes, but you can get some idea of what this is. This is percentage of sales or percentage of revenues, gross revenues. And depending on the nature of what's involved, the complexity of the cost, the structure of the industry, you'll see these kind of royalty rates. Now, when M.I.T. receives money in from royalties and other things, including sale of the company, how does it get distributed internally? At this point in time, this is sort of how it's done. It could differ in an individual case, but first of all, 15% comes off the top to support the operations of the TLO. Then there's a deduction of out-of-pocket costs, that usually patent prosecution type things. And then 1/3 of what's left after that is distributed to the inventors, typically equally, but you can request a different allocation among the inventors if somebody's put in more effort or etc. There are a few other adjustments in to the numbers based on operating expenses and a few other things, and what's left after all of that is split 50-50 between the department or departments in which the invention arose and M.I.T. in general. So this is a quick overview of licensing. I would encourage you, if you're thinking about launching a company out of a university, that you make sure you have very clean rights to it. You don't want to be spending a lot of time trying to raise money only to find out that you don't have those rights. And investors do care and will care about the situation. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at jgh@mit.edu. Thank you.